Alrighty, so if you only want the answer to the question that is posed at the bottom of the thumbnail, then the answer is no. Like, I mean, come on, seriously? Is that even a debate? Of course, Christians should not play a game that is called Diablo. I mean, seriously? Hello? The word is Spanish for devil. So, for those of you who only came to receive the answer to a question that you already knew the answer to, then I guess this is goodbye. Don't forget to hit the like, leave a comment, and make sure you blah blah blah. Okay, so for those of you that are still here, I guess you must have taken a look at the length of this video and wondered what else could there possibly be to say about this topic. Well, stick around, folks, because you are in for a treat. Or at least I think it is. Who knows what you guys think? Anywho, all that stuff I said earlier, throw it out the window. Because guess what? Certain Christians can play Diablo. Especially if you're one of these types of Christians.
And the voice of the Lord walked through the cool of the garden. And God said, Adam, where art thou? He didn't ask where Eve was, because Adam was Eve's mama.
A pastor I really respected said some words and hurt me so bad. And one time I was laying on the floor, actually it was in this room. I'm laying on the floor, and in a vision, in an encounter with God, in a vision, Jesus picks me up and holds me so close that I can't see anything. And he holds me so close, and Jesus starts to weep. And he says, please forgive me.
The Greek word fornication in the Bible does not refer to premarital sex.
The Greek word for fornication is porneia, which means sexual immorality. This word references all of the sexually immoral acts defined in Deuteronomy 22, which includes sex outside of marriage.
Okay. What is this? It's water. That's what we say, but if you want to be very scientific, this is H2O, okay? This is H2O. What is this? You say ice? If we go down to its basic form, this is H2O. This is a different expression. What is this? This is H2O too. It's dry ice. And it's a different expression. So if that was God the Father, God the Son, this is God the Holy Spirit. Still H2O. But it takes on a completely different form.
So let's just ignore the fact that dry ice is actually the solid form of carbon dioxide, not H2O. Let's talk about why this representation analogy of the Trinity is completely wrong. And it has been wrong for the last 1700 years. This isn't a new issue in the church. This error originally came from a man named Sabellius in the 3rd century. Sabellianism is a position in Christian theology. It is against the idea of the Trinity. Sabellianism is also known as modalism.
If you're a Christian that just uses the title to gain brownie points, but you don't actually do what the scriptures say.
See another commercial and see her disguising these policies behind the words Tennessee Christian values. Those aren't Tennessee Christian values. I live in Tennessee. I am Christian. That's not what we stand for.
It's our way or no way, you know, I mean, people have thrown to me, if you don't actually believe that I am the way, the truth, and the life, and that it's that one person.
There you go.
Yeah, that it's that one person. I believe Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. But Jesus represents a whole body of religion, not just one way.
I've seen it in the Bible. It clearly states that homosexuality is wrong. And if you are going to represent yourself as a Christian, and then you're going to go on the show and say that you also support that, it's double standarding.
Well, I have a different view of Christian than you do. Okay?
He is about to go on his day's Oprah Winfrey show. And it is not because he hid his Christianity.
And the God I serve doesn't care whether you're tall or short, or whether you were born black or Asian or gay. And so that's just a difference of belief. And I don't expect to change your belief today, because I have, just before I came down here, I'm late today because I was in the makeup room arguing with somebody who was telling me how all gay people are going to hell, and now I'm going to hell with all the other gay people for doing the show.
Does this sound like somebody who showed up on Oprah trying to make her happy? He didn't compromise to get there. He doesn't compromise while he is there.
I take full responsibility for my going to hell or heaven. I take full responsibility, and I feel that everybody who's concerned about me now going to hell because I'm doing the Ellen DeGeneres show, I think that you all should take that energy and try to create a little heaven here on earth for everybody. And I take full responsibility for it. I take full responsibility for it. See, I believe God created Ellen. I believe God did that.
So what happens when he gets on the Oprah show? He's got his big break. Oprah's going to hold up his book. By the way, anybody who's ever written a book, and any Christian author who tells you, man, I would never want Oprah to hold up my book, they're not telling you the truth. I would go on Oprah's show and let her spit in my face if she'll hold up one of my books so that people will go and read what's in there, because prayerfully they will encounter the gospel.
And if Ellen says she's gay, I believe God created her gay. I believe God did that.
You can't stand up there on that show and in front of this whole American society and say that you support that. I mean,
I support her right to be who she thinks she is.
So what's wrong with homosexuality? A number of things, but just a few in this context. Number one, it's a violation of the created order. It's not how we were made. Secondly, it denounces procreation categorically. Thirdly, it blasphemes the illustration. And this is especially true when we understand the illustration of Christ and his bride, the church. And then finally, it denies the very need for sanctification, because it takes what God calls sinful and calls it righteous. God calls this an abomination, and we instead call it righteous. It's the only sin, by the way, for which God destroyed cities with fire and brimstone. It's unique. It's unique. It's not like other sins. It's unique. Not all sins are called abominations. Homosexuality is unique in that regard. Very few sins in that category.
A game like Diablo, for those of you who haven't played it, it is an isometric top-down action role-playing game where you pick your character type, whether it is a pre-made class like a barbarian, crusader, assassin, demon hunter, necromancer, whatever. Then you set about in the world and fight the monsters of hell, or fight the forces of hell that have invaded the human world that is known as sanctuary. So from a certain viewpoint, you can kind of see yourself in a way as doing good in this fictional world. You're vanquishing evil and saving the day. But after the story concludes, none of the heroes have happy endings. In Diablo 3, you step into the shoes of a Nephilim. In the Bible, the Nephilim are described as hybrid beings that are made up of the DNA of the fallen angels and human women. So when you take all of these things into account, can you really say that you, as the player character, are on the side of goodness and righteousness? Or are you just another shade of evil? Now, let's dive a bit deeper into the Diablo series. In Diablo 1, you have who I consider to be the main character, whose name is Aiden, and he is the warrior class that you, as the player, can choose. While he is off at war, he returns home to find his father, King Leoric, corrupted by evil after his father listens to his advisor slash aide, which is a man named Lazarus. And just as a quick aside here, just me personally, I feel like naming this character Lazarus is basically a slap in the face to Christians, because if you know the story, then you know Lazarus was a friend of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, or in the Hebrew, Yeshua. And Jesus, went to this man's house and raised him from the dead. So, to put a character with the name Lazarus in the game Diablo, and to have this character basically act as a mouthpiece for evil, to have him siding and being in league with demons to the point that he basically brainwashes the king into sacrificing a bunch of people. This Lazarus person is a wizard, a sorcerer, an occultist who whispered in the ear of the king and corrupted him, and they basically ended up sacrificing the entire town that King Leoric was in charge of. So now, the warrior, upon returning to town, also finds out that his younger brother has been taken deeper into this labyrinth that has been summoned into the real world. And as the player, you obviously traverse these levels. You go through the dungeon, you kill skeletons and imps and so forth and so on. You get loot. Give me the loot! Give me the loot! You gear up and, rinse and repeat. But as the story continues, the warrior's younger brother ends up becoming the vessel for Diablo, aka the Lord of Terror. So now the warrior has to defeat Diablo, and obviously his younger brother dies. So the warrior ends up taking the crystal or soul stone that contains Diablo's essence, and he basically jams this thing into his forehead in order to contain the evil. However, I feel like this is symbolism which points to the warrior obtaining or opening his third eye, which people point to as being the pineal gland. And basically, the warrior goes through a process of opening up his third eye in order to gain access to greater occult powers. This scene, I feel like, is basically nothing more than a guide for people in the real world to follow that shows them how to obtain occult knowledge and powers. This game is basically telling you that you have to commit a ritual sacrifice, which the warrior does through killing his father and also by spilling the blood of a young child, which is his younger brother. And we know this because the person who was deemed to be the most evil man in the world, Aleister Crowley, he spoke of doing things like this and contacting other worldly spirits, and even wrote his book or his religion or whatever you want to call it, which is Thelema. So now, by the warrior doing these acts, he basically ends up forming a pact with Diablo and ends up becoming possessed by Diablo. The game is saying that the player can do this as well in the real world by following these steps. The game is basically saying that the warrior, by driving the soul stone into his forehead, is gaining access to enlightenment and occult powers and opening his third eye, which is also referred to as the Eye of Horus, and it's a symbol that is often used in occult rituals. Now, moving on to Diablo 2. In the sequel, the hero who is now possessed by Diablo is traveling the land of Sanctuary and is being led towards the east for some unknown reason. Along the way, the warrior is trying to fight off the possession of his body and the power of Diablo. The warrior is trying to keep his body from being fully taken over. However, in one of the game's cinematics, it shows the warrior stopping at a tavern or bar where he loses this battle briefly. And for that brief moment, his face and body contorts, and he basically ends up allowing Diablo to partially take possession of his body. Portals to hell are opened up where skeletal warriors appear in the bar alongside flying imps and other grotesque demonic creatures that manifest in the real world and end up killing everyone in the bar except for one person. The warrior eventually regains control and continues to push on, walking ever towards the east due to some unholy force that is guiding him. He eventually arrives at a temple complex where another one of the prime evils is being restrained, and the warrior loses his battle against Diablo. So Diablo ends up taking full control of the warrior's body, and he morphs or transforms fully into Diablo. So, as you can see, this is just another instance of real world occult practices being portrayed in video game form. People in the real world can make pacts with these entities, these Nephilim, these disembodied spirits, and these spirits end up giving that person otherworldly powers. It allows them to transform their bodies into creatures that most people consider to be fictional or mythical.
I saw men become monsters physically in front of my eyes. Other things come out of people's mouths. Other things come through their eyes. Like I witnessed enough transfiguration to know that this stuff is 100% stalking in the darkness. And I don't want that to rule me forever, but it was hard to not resist, you know, you're in it.
Well, so all right, seeing things like that, like you say, all right, so you said you saw men become monsters. Is that metaphorically or literally?
It's literally. I've seen men do nasty things like an animal, but then I've seen men become not people.
Like literally
Not be the
change.
people. Yeah.
Okay.
And there is like lycanthropy, and there's these understandings of what the watchers are capable of doing that most people are just woefully ignorant of. And that's why they're perishing. It's because they lack a basic understanding of history. And one of the predominant understandings of what a watcher, specific class of celestial beings, is capable of is augmenting itself. They can shapeshift. That is by their nature. They're literally called metaskizmadzotoi in the Greek in the New Testament. And it's because he says it's marvel not, because Hasatan you could say like transforms himself. That's a good word for it. But he shapeshifts himself into an angel of light. And his messengers, his apostles, disciples, they do the same thing. And people start engaging in these necromantic rituals and other stuff, and they start to seek the embodiment of these celestial ones. They can get these things on them and in them, and they can't contain them. And some of these guys who are messing with this stuff, who don't come from the bloodline, are incapable of cohabitating like a parasite, and they feed off of each other and they can't handle it. There's a lot of people that don't know this stuff, and they start to get into lesser magic, and all of a sudden it's like the doors of everybody open to them. But that's why. It's because they can host these things better. Whereas those that don't, they get taken over by this stuff, and they can't change back. They can't
Really?
return. in a sense. Like people become completely possessed and are incapable of expelling the darkness after that.
Just like it states in the Bible, we have a spiritual world and we have a physical world, what we would consider the real world. But this real world or this physical world is only temporary. Again, we are spirit, yet we are also clay, if that makes sense. And what Christians end up doing is they end up pushing aside the spiritual aspect of our being. They end up discounting the power of the spiritual world. And just like it states in Genesis, the angels came down to earth and mated with human women, and they produced offspring that we would call Nephilim or giants, the same way David fought Goliath, Goliath being a giant. So, speaking of the Nephilim, let's move on to Diablo 3, where the player takes on the task of, again, fighting against evil, but this time there's a bit of a caveat, and the player character has to choose between characters that are described as being Nephilim. Like I was just saying, from scripture, we know that the Nephilim are giants that roamed the earth during the days of Noah. Their DNA had so corrupted the the whole of humanity that the Most High God had to flood the entire earth. And by flooding the earth, he killed the Nephilim. So now you have all of these basically hybrid humans, for lack of a better term. You have people with that Nephilim DNA in them. But here's the thing, because they are the offspring of angels and human beings, now that they are dead, now that their bodies are gone, again, where is their spirit supposed to go? Remember, we all have a spiritual side. We all have a spirit or soul within this fleshy body. So now that the Nephilim's flesh and bone are gone, where is this spirit supposed to go? Because they can't really go to what the ancients considered Tartarus, which, as it says in the Bible, the angels who taught men war and all these other things, they ended up being locked away in darkness and chained. So that is a place that's reserved for them. And you have the Nephilim, who are, again, part spirit, part human. There really is no spot designated for them to go after they die because they are such an abomination. So now they are basically what is called disembodied spirits, what we would call evil spirits, ghosts, demons. People have put so many different labels on it over the years, trying to come to terms with what it is that they are seeing or experiencing. But these evil spirits now have no way to interact with the physical world. So I just find it interesting that Diablo 3 would introduce the player to the character being a Nephilim, and then have this Nephilim go about helping humanity and slaying evil and so forth and so on. It's almost conditioning people to view these hybrid beings, these abominations, as worthy of idolization or worthy of worship when they are not. Again, these Nephilim spirits are still here, just wandering the earth. They're in spirit, so obviously we can't, necessarily interact with them unless we decide to cross over into their realm. And there are several different ways of doing that. I won't get into it, but there are ways of contacting these spirits. Diablo 3 introduces the player to evil entities like Belial, who in the game is referred to as one of the lesser evils, and he ranks lower in comparison to the prime evils. Again, Diablo would be considered one of the prime evils. Now, Belial, along with Asmodan, who again is another one of the lesser evils, they start a war in hell where basically at the end of this civil war between the inhabitants of hell, the prime evils are banished to the human world. And now hell is basically split between Belial and Asmodan. In the game, your Nephilim character fights on the side of humanity and repels the lesser evils and their armies in order to keep them from conquering Earth. Diablo 3 also reintroduces the player to the witch Adria. The lore reveals that she ended up sleeping with Adrian, the... Wait, are their names really Adria and Adrian? Ha! Sounds like lazy writing if you ask me. Anywho, Adria and Adrian. Now, remember, again, in Diablo 1, Adrian, the warrior, he is possessed by the spirit of Diablo. So the witch Adria, she ends up sleeping with him while he is possessed with that spirit. And this witch ends up becoming pregnant. It turns out she gives birth to a daughter named Leah, who ultimately becomes the new host for Diablo. From the beginning,
in the beginning, in the beginning.
From Diablo 1, the inception of the game, Adria was envisioned as a person who had succumbed to the dark arts. So it only makes sense that as time passes, she would delve deeper into the occult, all the way up to the point of sacrificing her own daughter in order to obtain more power in the spiritual world. See, this is why followers of the Messiah, those who believe in Yeshua, we need to be careful and guard our eye gates, as well as bring every thought into captivity. While yes, we are protected, while yes, we do have power over demons and disembodied spirits through the power of Yeshua, that doesn't mean that these evil spirits can't whisper or try to influence you into committing sin. So now remember that sin is basically, or it can be translated as just basically missing the mark. So yes, we have the law and the commandments that we are called to follow, but we are also compelled to be more like the Messiah. But we have and will fall short. We will sin, or in other words, we will miss the mark, which is why we are given grace through Yeshua. However, there is a big difference between falling short and willfully going against the will of the Most High. And that is the slippery slope that people may find themselves upon when playing a video game like Diablo. You could start out like Adria in Diablo 1 and dabble in potions and occult knowledge, which might eventually lead to diving deeper into occult rituals and contacting disembodied spirits. And by the time you reach Diablo 3, you have progressed all the way to sacrificing innocent people, even your own daughter, because that is what the adversary wants from you. he takes and takes and takes until there is nothing left to give. And ultimately, you are locked away in darkness for all eternity as punishment for not turning to seek the Most High while you had the chance. So this video could go on even longer. And maybe if people would like, I can do a part 2 because I still haven't touched on Tyrael, who is depicted as an angel who then chose to leave heaven. During the game, you see a cinematic of him falling out of the sky, which brings up the imagery of fallen angels or Lucifer falling from heaven. And then Tyrael ends up helping humanity, which obviously plays into the theme of the Gnostic belief, like so many other false religions and ancient myths out there that would have you believe that Lucifer, or his actual name in the Hebrew, Hallel ben Shahar, which was translated into the Shining One or the Morning Star, which is why you get the name Lucifer. And again, remember, a name like Satan is more so just a title. It's a descriptive term. It's the adversary. Even names like Belial, which are used as descriptors to describe people who are, say for example, worthless or against the Most High. These titles, these descriptors, are basically describing the attributes of the fallen angels. In order to get their actual real names, it's a complex process. But without knowing their true names, you end up ascribing certain attributes to certain beings, and things just sort of get lost in translation, if you will. So the being that we know as Satan or Lucifer is deemed as the leader of the evil spirits, deemed as leader of the fallen angels because of what they view as his accomplishments in the garden and getting man to sin or miss the mark or fall short and basically introduce death into God's perfect creation. But the Gnostics or the Essenes or the people who ascribe to the Church of Satan or people who follow Thelema, they would have you believe that Hallel ben Shahar is actually a good guy. He came to earth in order to help humanity, in order to give them knowledge, because the Most High is seen as a bad guy who wants to keep people oppressed and keep knowledge away from them, instead of realizing that by giving humans this knowledge before they are ready. I mean, just look at what happened with all of the wars we've had recently in just the past, few hundred years or so. All the way from World War I to World War II, dropping of the atomic bomb. These are technologies that humanity, to be perfectly honest with you, does not need. We are perfectly capable of killing each other by the thousands without a weapon of mass destruction that can wipe out millions. So, is, your Heavenly Father sometimes considered a bad guy? Yes, the same way your parents are sometimes considered bad. If you want to eat a cookie at 1 o'clock in the morning and you know it's going to give you a tummy ache and your parent says no, is that them being mean? Is that them being the bad guy? Or is that them looking out for you because they know what is best for you even when you don't know? That's why we need to just take a pause and just stop relying on our own intelligence. We need to just be rooted in his word and rely on him and have faith that he will put us where we need to be when the time is right. So again, like I said, I could go on forever and ever and ever about this game, about this topic. So please let me know if you want a part 2. But in the meantime and in between time, that will do it for this video. It's been your boy, your big unk, Max Vapor, and it has been a pleasure. Be sure to keep God first and be blessed in the name of Yeshua. Peace.